And now the entertainment value will increase.
How did we get here? And really, it's three major reasons. Our critical public services were suffering inadequate funding. We were requiring employee concessions of $6 million a year, which translates to over $30 million worth of cuts in services and layoffs. And we had deferred capital projects, which were really threatening the health and safety of the residents of Salinas. That's how we got here.
Right, and obviously, this is the Measure V in the oodles of political muscle.
What staff is recommending, and what I've said I think a few times now, is that we're recommending that there be one meeting that's consistent with what the language of the ordinance says.
The reason, and this is very important for everybody to hear, is we are having a public discussion, and this is a democracy. What staff recommended was staff's recommendation. All of us up here, however, listen to staff and we listen to the public, and then we come up with what we think is going to be the best solution.
The political back scratching needs to stop. It's only going to stop here, but I don't think we have the political gall to do that. It's going to continue. The scope and the community responsibilities, it cannot be just approve the report. There's no financial or even expenditure teeth whatsoever. Again, going back to the history of everything here, of Measure V, Measure E, now Measure G, we're not going to get the results that we're looking for. And we've done this before, 10 years ago. We continue doing this over and over.
But keep in mind that because the scope of authority is limited, if you have them meet more than once, you need to ask yourself, what would they be doing? Because they're not a budget review committee. They don't provide direction with respect to the expenditure of Measure G funds. What they do is they report out on how the City Council has directed the expenditure of Measure G funds.
The reason, and this is very important for everybody to hear, is we are having a public discussion, and this is a democracy. We attended a conference regarding creating equity within our city systems.
Actually, with the comment that was made, if there is more representation in one district area, how do we bring equity to this table?
This is not a rubber stamp committee.
You cannot change the language of the ordinance, which was voter approved.
You need to Google Oversight Committee. You might get a different opinion on what's being presented to you.
I want to acknowledge some concern on the dais, primarily because of the amount of meetings. One of the things that we have talked about, and one of the things that sort of rang true for me was our city attorney, who said, if this committee meets and there's nothing to talk about, then why are we having a meeting, essentially? It's important to recognize that they are an oversight committee. Their responsibility is to review the audit and then give feedback on that.
And they don't even have financial or expenditures say. Is just approving a report. How is it that we support, through this whole process, of a group that meets once a year, that doesn't have much of a financial say, when you got 65% of the city residents, they're youth? We have promises made 52 years ago of an annexation, which is now the high-density part of this city, as well as a senior center that should have been built back in the 70s. So how is it that we get to those priorities before we go through this priority-based budgeting and all the other special interest groups that are lined up for the millions of dollars?
I don't have an answer to that question, but I think this is about going forward.
Congratulations to this board for being calloused enough to reject the voices and opinions of the people that you serve.
The committee is intended to be a citizens review committee. It's not supposed to be stacked with special interests and political sharks. We don't want this committee it should not include labor unions or police officers. It should be citizens. It should be representing the families of Salinas, who are the backbone and who are paying most of the tab for this measure. The old political dynamic of fear and division is outdated. The politics of pitting labor against bosses, Mexicans against whites, police against citizens, those politics have no place in Salinas, and those who promote and profit from such divisiveness have no place at our table. There's a silent majority in Salinas. It's a majority of families. We don't always come to these meetings. You don't always hear from us. But we're watching, and our patience is wearing thin. We demand a higher level of performance, professionalism, and personal conduct from our elected officials, our public employees, and our police officers.
I just want to remind everyone that in the ordinance that was adopted by the voters or approved by the voters on November 4th of last year, Section 32-94 sets out the Measure G Oversight Committee and generally outlines its responsibilities and the scope of its authority. The voters approved this ordinance and tasked the Oversight Committee with the responsibility to review and report on the receipt of revenue and expenditure of funds. That report will be regarding the use of the revenue and such other matters as the council may assign.
Measure G was passed by voters with the intent that the money be used for law enforcement, specifically additional police officers. That is how the measure was billed and sold to the public. We have a crime problem in Salinas. Everybody knows that. That crime is like a fire. When your house is on fire, the first thing you do is put out the fire. Then we can focus on these other priorities that are also equally important, but we have to put out the fire first.
And as it relates to Measure G, we have a very specific list is up on the screen there as to what this measures dollars will apply to. And if you look at our city budget, the vast majority of our city budget goes to public safety services. And I think that's what we will see with these dollars. There's aging infrastructure. I think we'll see that as well. It comes to prevention in the form of sports and in the form of art. And when it comes to code enforcement, I think as we see it aligned now, it goes alongside what our law enforcement professionals need to do to kind of keep that going. And then, as I mentioned earlier, services when it relates to, Friday. People banging on City Hall, calling me saying, why isn't it opening? And I'm having to explain again and again and again.
I have full trust of the City Council and the Mayor that they will do an excellent job. I want to say this. She's doing an excellent job, but it's from the top down. Your funds are, you got a lot of strings attached to your funds, fed, state, and local. This money here is locally generated. You have to pay these employees. You have no choice. They had their hands out, and they said, we'll take a pay cut. I'll work 10 more years. I know some people here worked almost 40 years. That gentleman just said, I knew him. I used to be his supervisor. I worked with Bonner County.
The public workers have been on furlough for almost 7 years. That's a 10% reduction in their wages. They deferred their salaries, their 4% wage increases for over 4 years. So they've made a huge sacrifice for this city. They made a huge monetary sacrifice, and this city does pay its debts, right?
One thing I definitely want to clear up right away, as certain folks in the public have touted for months now, that Tony and I kept saying that almost 100% of this tax measure will go to employee benefits and raises and everything else. I actually passed a note to our finance director to clarify. If we were to reopen City Hall on Fridays, it's 2.4, maybe as much as 2.8 million. And that's restoration of services. That's a day that people knock on the door and it's closed. And that took place because we just didn't have money. When it comes to deferred raises, as it relates to Measure G money, that was a big zero. Because Measure G money is specific, and you can't build in, say, raises, which is in a different pot of money, to what is a very specific or general in nature, but a very prescribed pot of money.
Really? I thought it's all general fund. Great presentation on how the remainder of the money be spent according to the surveyed priorities set by the people and the council on priority budgeting process. But it appears that it's only going to be $1 million that we're talking about. The $19 million is already gone. It's the last $1 million that we're going to divide the 23 different ways. Because as Steve McShane and Tony Barrera said in a community meeting, $10 million a year is going back to the employee back pay. Done, 3 years. As your city manager said, $7 million is gone to CalPERS, health insurance, and workers' comp. Matt Presti so eloquently said $2 million to end Friday furloughs. 3 days later, McShane, in a letter to Californian, updated that to $3 million. To me, $10 million, $7 million, $3 million, there's your $20 million. Where will you get the money to spend on the priorities that the people put with the survey? What benefits would the people get out of here? That is a question that this council has been dancing around. It's time you give people some answers. Guaranteed public safety, folks, not politics and not lies. Thank you.
Let's not forget that Alisal District community, or the business district, that makes up about $5.5 million just in revenue sales tax. Compare that to any other side.
So Measure G comes in July 1st. Are we going to have a bunch of cops here?
Sadly, the answer is no.
The sentiment that I hear from our residents, the people that we serve, we need more officers, but yet currently you have the money to hire officers, but you're not able to for obvious reasons that you only understand.
Sure. Well, I think the important add-on to the sentiment that we need to hire more officers is we need to hire more really high-quality, ethically sound people who want to serve our community kind of police officers, and they're really hard to find right now.
So as far as our budget process, we have a kind of a ongoing cyclical approach. You know, there's community input, there's council, goal setting at the beginning of the budget process. Departments take that information, develop the programs, and allocate or make a proposal that goes to the city manager for his review, and then the council then reviews that plan, adopts it, and then the cycle continues again.
And then we looked at that, and what we start to look at here is at the bottom as you go to staff. And what happens with the council is that they resource staff to produce projects and programs that we expect will be consistent with the strategic framework.
Interesting that these community meetings, nothing has been shown about ethnic composition. And no wonder those graphs show the feeling of the community. And so who is the community that attended these meetings?
I asked you at the last council meeting to have anyone in the council deny that any of the employees will ever get back pays. Haven't heard that yet.
And what it says, Measure G will improve the quality of life in Salinas neighborhoods. Measure G will improve public safety. Now, public safety can mean police. Public safety can mean prevention. Public safety can mean good sidewalks, good streets. Strengthen programs that keep teens on the right track. Repair streets and sidewalks. Help make our parks safer and cleaner, and even more. And it says effective programs that fight gangs. Engage teens in constructive activities. Clean up parks and playgrounds, ensure that our recreation centers are open so they are safe. Supervise places for kids to play. Many crumbling streets and sidewalks, we need them fixed.
So I'm just concerned about how Measure G is going to turn out. It is a general tax. That's my biggest concern. It says it's for public safety, it says it's for fire, it says it's for code enforcement, it says it's for anti-gang, yet you can do whatever you want with this money.
At the conference we attended, Salinas is by far and away the leader in reaching out and getting community input. It's amazing what we're hearing from cities throughout California.
People will think that they were misled if the Measure G committee is nothing more than an audit committee. People out there thought that the Measure V, or think that the Measure G committee will be a committee that will provide substantial input to the council, that will help the council hear the concerns of the residents of Salinas, that will help the council use Measure G funds to leverage better programs, better services for the community.
Because if we're not doing what the public asks, there should be 7 other people sitting up here. And I'm unmerciful about that, because I've had council members say, this seat belongs to the public. Well, maybe the public needs to take it back if we're not doing our job.
Now, one thing I want to say, because the cost of government is going up, there's no doubt about it. There's costs increases in everything. You have to keep in mind that as costs go up, tax revenue goes up as well. Property taxes will go up and sales tax revenue will go up. And so the city, by design, knock on wood, is in a position to be able to accommodate increasing costs and increasing revenues. I mean, if you look at the audience today, you have a huge, packed number of people that really care. And it's just frankly awesome that we have as many people that do care, because when people care, they report crimes, they serve as witnesses, and just as we heard from Ken Sr., they may be more likely to help a neighbor with that cat that's in a tree rather than dial 911. To say that our appointees should be like any other appointees. You know, if we need to unappoint them because they're not showing up or they're just quite frankly disruptive, then we should be allowed that latitude.
Steve, you're absolutely right. Yes, you're absolutely right. The committee is going out, and you will hear what the community's needs are. So you will bring it back, and we will look at that and make our decision. So I also want to say that someone that said about the unions are part of our community. Steve said it all, so I will pass on the mic to Councilmember Barrera.
When we provide transparency and an opportunity for residents to share what's happening in their neighborhood, let the Oversight Committee sit here or wherever they want, in districts, whatever, but to be open, accessible to the residents. How many meetings? Let them decide that. Let these 7 individuals select a chairperson, a vice chair. Let them structure themselves. That way they understand that there's somebody that's in charge of the meeting and they dialogue. I think it's important that we allow them to do this. And I think one of the important things, Mr. Pressy, as our finance director, getting that budget early is critical. Allow this committee to understand what we want and let them dissect that. Let them come before this council, and that's when the politicians will debate and we will discuss the issues. Because actually the buck stops right here.
If you look at the folks as the names are released and the envelopes are opened, I can certainly speak to my appointee. She's not a rubber stamper. We're talking about somebody that's quite engaged. And I have a feeling she'll be very vocal. And this is going to be a unique process to go through that.
I just want to comment with the people in the audience. Ray Montemayor, Steve Furtado, Maureen, Ken, both Kens, Caesar and Al were at every single Measure G meeting for months and months and months every Friday afternoon.
So if the commission or the committee needs to meet 100 times, I'm okay with that. Especially if we can get people like Juan and Cesar and Bridget and some of these names that have been thrown around to be that engaged, that's strong.
Does it pass the smell test to have them come out after a review and say, yes, you spent the money, or no, you spent the money the wrong way after the money has been spent?
What staff is recommending is that the committee member terms match the council member's term of office. So for example, if you have 3 years remaining in your term, your appointee will have 3 years on the Measure G committee unless that council member decides to replace that person and appoint somebody else. Or as we do with some of our commissions, if a particular committee member is not performing according to the expectations of the council, then the council may remove a member from the Measure G committee. We're contemplating, and the ordinance contemplates, 1 meeting where this committee will have reviewed the auditor's report on the revenue and the expenditures of Measure G funds, and then you'll issue a report. The committee will issue a report to the City Council, and that's by May 30th of each year. Again, that's what the specific language of the ordinance provides. That's what your staff is recommending.
What do we tell the citizens, residents of the city? What type of teeth do they have, really?
Let me try and answer this one, council member. The teeth, as it were, resides as it always does with the city council. It's the city council that has the exclusive authority with respect to the adoption and the establishment of a budget. Section 32-94 of this ordinance, which is what the voters approved, provides some specific language as to the role of this committee. It consists of no fewer than 7 members to review and to report on the receipt of revenue and expenditure of funds from the tax authorized by Measure G. That is their exclusive level of authority. Everything else resides with the city council.
This can be repealed if the residents, again, of the city don't see teeth or having validity to this whole process of an oversight of millions of dollars. Especially we're going to be anticipating $20 million. So they can repeal this as well, Mr. Callahan?
The voters have the authority to repeal taxes, yes.
We're in a world full of untrust. You can't even trust your leaders. Who the hell can I trust? You're going to select somebody, a yes man, for the G committee.
Honestly, I think the best way to do this is a special tax. We are implementing something to that effect. We meet Monday nights at 6 p.m. at 369 South Main Street. City Council is welcome to attend. Chief of Police and Fire, they're welcome to attend. Again, 369 South Main Street, 6 p.m. You can look up publicsafety2014.com. You can like us on Facebook, Salinas Public Safety Committee. Hope to see you there.
What type of teeth does this oversight going to have with millions of dollars from taxpayers' money?
But keep in mind that because the scope of authority is limited, if you have them meet more than once, you need to ask yourself, what would they be doing?
And Mr. Callahan, I have the utmost respect for you. I really do. But if this committee only meets one time a year, why even have it?
You need to Google Oversight Committee. You might get a different opinion on what's being presented to you.